And keep in mind too, drop cutting is always easier with a smaller stack. So while you may want to start out with a big stack and go out and start drop cutting, do yourself a favor, start with a smaller stack when you do this. Basically, you're using your fingers to gauge whatever number of checks you want to put on the layout and bring them out in one smooth motion. So if I wanted to do 3 checks, I'm going to break this down into its steps first, and then we'll go from there. I need to get 3 checks from this stack of checks onto the layout. Now somebody could say, well, why don't you just take 3 off the top and set them there? Well, you can actually. That's actually a technique called picking, which is used a lot in craps, but not so much in blackjack. In blackjack, if you wanted a small number of checks like that, you'd use another technique called plucking. Let me go ahead and pull back to the tray here. And the tray is a mess, and I'm sorry, but that's just the way things are. Plucking just involves using your thumb, your forefinger, and your middle finger to pluck out 1, 2, 3, or 4 checks. You can set them on the layout and square them up. So if you went in slow motion, you can start with either your index finger or your middle finger. It really doesn't matter. The important thing to watch is how the forefinger and the middle finger alternate. So if I start here, I pick the first one. Let's do that again so it's better. It's between my forefinger and my thumb. Now the next one's going to be, place the middle finger on here. It's plucked up. Now it's between my middle finger and my forefinger, but I pull the forefinger out of the way. That allows those 2 checks to snap together. If I want a 3rd check, I go back down, place the forefinger on it, and repeat the same thing. Whoops, that was kind of messy. I can do it all with the same finger, but you'll notice the fingers jump off to accommodate the checks going up underneath. So in kind of slow motion, it kind of looks like this. And that allows us to pluck full checks. When you get a really skilled dealer, a really experienced blackjack dealer, they can just reach down and you won't be able to keep up with how fast they pluck them. I am not a very good blackjack dealer, but I'm not too bad at plucking checks. And that would be 4 checks. Now pulling back out to here, we're going to jump back to the drop cutting. So let's say we wanted to use the drop cutting technique just to get 2 checks on the layout. There's 3 ways that I've learned to look at the drop cutting. Some people find it much easier to think of rolling the checks out, kind of like this, and then placing them on the layout. Some people find it easier to think of pushing the checks back like this. Now you'll notice that the rolling out and pushing back look almost identical. And in fact, they pretty much are. It's just whatever causes the process to stick into your head the best is the one you should use. Now, 3rd variation is just to do what's called lift the lid. A lot of very good dealers do this also. They just, with their index finger, lift all the checks above the amount they want and just let them drop to the table. So those are 3 different techniques of drop cutting. What they have in common is the index finger is the gauge. Right here, it's going to feel where it needs to be on the stack. If you want to drop cut 2 checks, the index finger has to be at the 3rd check, the one right above the amount you want to drop. If you want to drop 1, index finger is at check 2. You want to drop 4, index finger is at check 5. So just doing 1, 2, and 3, 1, 2, oh, I got 3 left. That's no good. Let's get a little more. 1, 2, and 3. Now, thinking roll out with the thumb works best for me. But whatever works best for you is what you need to use. So I pick those up. Somebody may think, I'm going to push back. There's 1, 2, and 3. Now I'm going to do this again with using the lift technique. And this is a subtle difference from the other 2. I think it looks pretty neat and clean, but I've used the rollout technique for so long that that's what I'm comfortable with. But there are very good dealers that use the lift technique. Basically just lift up, let it fall, lift up, there's 2, lift, there's 3. Now you notice the difference. Here, watch my middle finger. Here's the technique I use. Kind of just rolling out or pushing back. 1, 2, 3. Middle finger doesn't really come out that much until I'm actually walking the stack down my hand, which I'll get to in a minute. With the lift technique, the middle finger jumps right out. We lift up. Why? Because it's letting go of the check. 2, 3. See how it kind of jumps out like that? Now, in a little bit, we're going to go ahead and turn the camera upside down and shoot this from underneath so you can see what the fingers are doing. Here's, I promise you, a view of drop cutting from underneath. So here it is. I'm just going to do it a few times. I'm not going to break it down or anything like that, just to give you a different view. So let me get these right in the middle of the frame. Okay, so here's how we're holding the checks. See kind of all fingers are around there. And when I drop cut, I'm going to use my preferred technique of the rollout. Just kind of rolls out. See how it pivots on the middle finger? And set it down. Rolls out, set it down. Roll out, set it down. Pick those back up. Let's look at it again. Roll out, set it down. Push back, set it down. Whoops, drop one. And let's say we lift. Not much difference, huh? That's just a quick view from underneath, okay? So let's say we have a stack, doesn't matter how many. Start with a small stack because it's easier to handle. And you want to drop cut 3 checks. The first thing you need to do is figure out how you are going to tell that you're going to drop cut 3 checks. So the most universally used technique is to use the first finger, pointer, whatever you want to call it, as your gauge. And you'll feel on the stack where about 3 checks is. And don't worry if you don't get this right away, because it's an acquired skill. Alright? So now, once you know where 3 checks is, use this by sitting this index finger on the 4th check. You can either roll them out, you can either push them back, or you can lift the lid. Notice the 4th finger is involved with all these things. So 3 checks, set them down. Now I like using the rollout because I push down on the layout with my 4-finger, and that kind of just cements the checks into place for me. And it's especially good if you're placing like place bets or something like that. Push back lets you do the same thing. The lift doesn't quite let you do that, but what you're going to do is release the checks low to the layout, so when they drop right where you want them to. Okay, so to back up, first you need to find out how you're going to determine the number of checks to drop. If I'm going to drop 4 checks, I'm going to make a break somewhere, either to roll out, to push back, or to lift with my 4-finger, and then release with the other fingers. Now, I mentioned earlier about walking the checks down your hand. I'm going to get a few more checks here. You will see a lot of beginning dealers do this. And I want to show you what they do and then show you what I do, and you'll see a difference. And then I'll point out the difference. Okay, drop cut 2. It's not neat, it's not clean, but it's there. Oops, that's 3. Now, here's the way I would do it. Did you see the difference? Do it one more time. Here's my way. And here is the other way. Better yet, did you hear the difference? The difference is this. Instead of walking the checks down their hand, like so, whoops, make sure I get 2. A lot of people choose to drop the stack on the table to reset their fingers. Now their fingers are at the bottom, and they can go ahead and gauge with their 4-finger, reset, 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 and so on and so forth. What you want to do is cultivate the skill of walking the checks down your hand. What do I mean by that? Well, let's say I got the checks down here, and watch all my fingers. I'm going to drop cut 3. See how they readjust? 3, readjust, and 3. Put 3 more in there just so I can do it 3 times. 3, 3, 3, oops, that's 4, and 3. What you're doing is basically whatever gets taken away at the bottom, you're just walking the rest of them down there. Okay, instead of, if I drop cut 4, come back here, 4, I can drop them and reset, that's fine, and drop cut 5 and reset, but it's neater, smoother, and you'll end up being faster actually if you learn to walk them down your hand. Now what's the best way to do that? The best way I've found to learn to do that is take about 5 or 6 checks. If they're practice checks and you don't need them, tape them together into one big heavy check. Then just practice walking it up and walking it back down your hand. Just up and down. If I turn to the side, you can kind of see it going up and down. Now if you haven't done this before, this muscle right here in your thumb, you're going to feel it. It's going to start to hurt. That's okay. If it starts to get tight, starts to be painful, stop. You can come back and do this later. You don't have to do it overnight. Walk up, walk down. Now the first time you do it, it's probably going to be something like this. Walk up, whoops. Get the idea? That's okay. That's why you tape them together. It's like a little mini weight for your hand. You're just going up, down. Just do that about 10 times. You can do that when you're watching TV. When the commercial comes on and you're not doing anything, rather than going and getting another bowl of chips, just walk the checks up and down your hand. You'll live longer.